The last mooring line slipped free just after sunrise. A low horn echoed across Vishakhapatnam harbor as Iristina eased slowly away from the pier. Tugboats drifted nearby, while the harbor pilot guided the frigate into the outbound channel. Along the waterfront promenade, spectators had gathered to watch the fleets depart. Families leaned over the railings. Children waved excitedly at the ships. Several young women in bright saris stood laughing together as they raised their phones to capture the long line of gray warships moving toward the sea. A few sailors along Dina's rail lifted their hands in return before a petty officer called quietly from the deck. "Maintain formation." On the bridge wing, Commander Zari watched the harbor pilot and engine indicators closely. A harbor tug sat alongside the frigate's stern, its engines rumbling as it pushed gently against the hull. "Engines ahead slow," Zari ordered. The helmsman repeated the command. For a moment, the ship responded normally. Then, the engine indicator flickered. One of the gas turbine engines lagged slightly as the throttles came up. The ship's forward motion slowed unexpectedly. For a brief second, the bow drifted closer toward the concrete edge of the pier. Nothing dramatic, but enough for every officer on the bridge to notice. The harbor pilot remained calm. "Tug has her," he said. Outside, the tug captain increased power, pressing the vessel firmly away from the dock while engineers below brought the turbine fully online. Within moments, the engine stabilized. The frigate answered the helm again and began sliding smoothly into the channel. Zari glanced once more at the pier, now safely behind them. "In a harbor this crowded," he said quietly, "small problems become large ones very quickly." Ahead, the harbor entrance widened. One by one, the visiting ships began filing out toward the open waters of the Bay of Bengal. Morning at sea. On the bridge, Commander Abuzar Zari watched the channel markers slide past the forward windows. "Steady on course," the navigation officer reported. "Steady, aye." Behind them, the hatch opened. A burly officer stepped quietly onto the bridge, carrying himself with the calm dignity of a man long accustomed to command. Several watchstanders straightened slightly as he passed. The man's uniform carried the unmistakable insignia of a senior commander, and the silver in his beard reflected the pale morning light. No announcement was necessary. Everyone on the bridge already knew who he was. Zari turned slightly and inclined his head in greeting. The officer returned the gesture and walked forward beside him, resting his hands lightly behind his back as he studied the fleet spreading across the horizon. For several moments, he said nothing. Helicopters circled above the ships, warships maneuvered slowly into position. Finally, the officer spoke. "An impressive gathering." Zari nodded. "Yes, Admiral." The man standing beside him was Admiral Shahram Irani, commander of the Iranian Navy. Irani had taken command of the Navy several years earlier, becoming the first Sunni officer to lead a branch of Iran's armed forces in the history of the Islamic Republic. A career sailor, he had spent decades commanding ships and naval task groups across the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, the Caspian Sea, and beyond. He had also spent many years studying the movements of Western fleets, especially those of the United States Navy, whose warships frequently operated near Iranian waters. Those encounters had rarely been calm, but Irani had built his reputation on patience and control. Now he stood quietly on the bridge of Dina, observing one of the largest international naval gatherings he had ever attended. Combat Information Center, 2 decks below. The Combat Information Center glowed softly with green light. Petty Officer Reza Farhadi leaned forward over the radar console as the rotating sweep painted contacts across the screen. Ships, helicopters, aircraft moving high above the fleet. The tactical display was already crowded. "Multiple air contacts," Reza reported quietly. Beside him, another operator studied the display. "You see how busy the sky is?" Amir Haddadi said. Reza adjusted the radar gain slightly. Exercise aircraft. Amir nodded but rubbed his eyes. Still hearing that music in my head. Reza allowed himself a faint smile. One of the other sailors glanced over from the console. You two actually went to the Milan village party? Amir shrugged. Just to see. Reza said nothing. Milan village had been louder than either of them expected. Colored lights sweeping across the waterfront stage, while sailors from half the world packed the festival area. You danced, Reza said. Amir shook his head quickly. I did not dance. You tried. That was not dancing.
That was definitely dancing.
Amir laughed quietly.
At least the food was good.
The biryani was excellent, Reza admitted. Amir grinned. And the women. Reza kept his eyes on the radar screen. Yes, he said carefully. There were women. Amir leaned closer to the console. You see the Indian officer there? The one in the white uniform? Reza glanced sideways. The liaison officer? No, the younger one, Amir said. The woman, Priya. Reza remembered her, standing under the bright stage lights as the music rolled across the harbor. She was dancing, Amir said, laughing, really enjoying it. Reza nodded slightly. Amir rubbed the back of his neck. I thought about asking her to dance. Reza turned his head a fraction. And? Amir gave a small shrug. I did not have the courage. Reza allowed himself a faint smile. That was probably wise. Amir chuckled softly. And that Sri Lankan sailor, Nalin, Amir added. He was dancing too, right in the middle of it like he had done it 1,000 times. Reza remembered that as well, the easy way Nalin had moved through the crowd while the music thundered from the stage. They had met him earlier that evening near one of the food stalls. Nalin Pereira had insisted they try the grilled fish and rice from a small stand along the waterfront.
Good man, Amir said. Very friendly.
Reza continued watching the slow sweep of the radar screen.
Yes. Amir chuckled. He said if our ship ever comes to Colombo, he will show us the best food in the city. Reza shrugged. First, we survive tomorrow's fleet review.
Amir leaned back in his chair.
You know what I heard? He said quietly.
What?
Someone said they saw the captain at the festival. Reza shook his head. The captain has very many important dignitary events to attend all week. I would not be surprised.
The radar sweep continued its steady rotation. Ships, aircraft, helicopters. Outside in the harbor, the distant music from the waterfront drifted faintly across the water. Inside CIC, the watch continued. The fleet outside, the multinational fleet spread slowly across the calm water. Ships maneuvered into formation. Helicopters traced wide patterns above the sea. On the bridge, Commander Zari watched the expanding line of ships. Behind him, Admiral Irani remained silent, studying the horizon. A voice from the Combat Information Center crackled over the bridge speaker. Air contact bearing 110. Zari glanced toward the radar repeater mounted near the helm as the symbol moved quickly across the screen before fading. Another aircraft, probably part of the exercise. Across the wide blue ocean, ships from many nations continued moving into position under the rising sun. From the outside, the scene looked orderly, almost ceremonial, but the morning was only just beginning. And before the day was over, the ships gathered in these waters would assemble in a way few of the sailors aboard them would ever forget.